Marcus Rodriguez had exactly 3 rules for his new life as a cargo ship cook. Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and for the love of all that's holy, never let anyone know you used to blow things up for a living. The crew of the merchant vessel Stellar Gravy knew him as Mac, the guy who somehow managed to make even synthetic protein taste like cardboard soaked in regret, which, to be fair, was a pretty accurate description of his cooking. But Mac had learned a long time ago that being underestimated was the best camouflage in the universe. "Mac, your breakfast gave me food poisoning again," complained Thornberry, the ship's security chief, a man so soft he probably got winded opening pickle jars. "What did you put in those eggs?" "Eggs," Mac replied, scraping what looked like rubber cement off a frying pan, "and maybe some of that green stuff from the back of the cooler." "That green stuff was supposed to be white." Mac shrugged. "Time's a funny thing in space, Thornberry. Things change color, like how your face turns green every time you eat my cooking." The truth was, Mac could have prepared a 5-star meal that would make angels weep. Back in his military days, he'd cooked for generals and diplomats. He'd also learned 17 different ways to kill a man with a spatula, but that was beside the point. The point was that being known as the worst cook in 3-star systems meant nobody paid attention to him, and that was exactly how he liked it. "Morning, Mac," chirped Pip, the communications officer, a nervous little guy who jumped at shadows and probably apologized to doors when he walked through them. "Any chance today's lunch won't try to crawl off my plate?" "No promises," Mac said, watching Pip's shoulders slump in defeat. Poor kid was fresh out of the academy, probably dreamed of adventure among the stars. Instead, he got stuck monitoring subspace chatter and eating Mac's aggressively mediocre food. Captain Holloway strutted into the galley like he was auditioning for a role in a space opera. Everything about the man screamed, "Look at me," from his perfectly pressed uniform to his dramatically swooshing coat. "Mac, my good man, please tell me you've mastered the art of coffee." "I've mastered the art of hot brown liquid that contains caffeine," Mac replied, handing over a mug that could charitably be called coffee if you squinted and had low standards. "Marvelous," Holloway said, taking a sip and immediately regretting every life choice that led to this moment. "Well, carry on then." As the captain departed, probably to practice his heroic poses in the mirror, Mac went back to his routine. Clean the galley, prep the meals, listen to the crew complain about the food, and quietly catalog every detail about the ship's operations. Old habits died hard, and Mac's habits had been forged in military fire. He knew the Stellar Gravy better than anyone, every corridor, every maintenance shaft, every hiding spot. He knew the crew's routines, their weaknesses, their fears. He knew which bulkheads were reinforced and which ones would crumble if you looked at them wrong. Most importantly, he knew that in about 6 hours, when they hit the shipping lanes near the Meridian cluster, they'd be prime targets for pirates. The crew thought they were safe because they were just a cargo hauler. Mac knew better. He'd seen the manifests. They were carrying enough rare earth elements to fund a small war. But hey, he was just the cook. What did he know? The proximity alarms started screaming at exactly 14:32 ship time, which was impressive considering Mac had predicted 14:30. He was getting rusty. "This is Captain Vexstar of the Crimson Claw," crackled a voice over the comm system that sounded like gravel mixed with bad intentions. "Surrender immediately, or we'll turn your ship into space debris." Captain Holloway's response was about as effective as you'd expect from a man who practiced dramatic poses. "Now see here, we're just a simple cargo vessel. We have nothing of value." "Captain," Pep squeaked from the bridge, "they're scanning our cargo hold. They know about the rare earth shipment." "Ah," Holloway said, deflating like a punctured balloon. "Well then, crew, prepare to be boarded." Mac rolled his eyes so hard he worried they might fall out. The great Captain Holloway, ladies and gentlemen, defender of nothing and master of immediate surrender. The pirates came through the main airlock like they owned the place, which technically they did now. Mac counted 12 of them, all armed with energy weapons that looked like they'd been stolen from a dozen different military forces. Vexstar himself was a towering alien with 4 arms and an attitude problem, wearing enough weapons to level a small city. "Everyone on the floor," Vexstar barked, "hands where we can see them." The crew dropped faster than Mac's souffle attempts. Thornberry was practically hyperventilating, Pip looked like he might faint, and Holloway was muttering something about diplomatic immunity that nobody was listening to. "You," Vexstar pointed one of his forearms at Mac, "you're the cook." "Guilty as charged," Mac said, staying on his feet because, hey, he was just the harmless cook. "You guys want some snacks? I've got some sandwiches that'll knock your socks off." "We don't wear socks," growled a pirate with scales and an attitude. "Your loss," Mac shrugged. They're really something special. What Mac didn't mention was that his something special sandwiches contained a delightful blend of synthetic meat, expired cheese, and a mild sedative he'd been saving for emergencies. The sedative was technically a food preservative, but it had the pleasant side effect of making people very, very sleepy. Fine, Vexstar said, apparently deciding that even pirates needed lunch breaks. Bring us food. The rest of you, don't move or my crew will demonstrate their marksmanship skills. Mac shuffled off to the galley, playing up the harmless cook routine while his mind shifted into tactical mode. 12 pirates, various weapons, unknown ship configuration, but probably standard raider class. The crew was useless, which was expected. The pirates were overconfident, which was perfect. He started making sandwiches, humming tunelessly while he worked. The pirates who'd followed him to the galley were already getting bored, their attention wandering. Amateur hour. "What's that smell?" asked one of them, a bug-eyed creature with too many teeth. "That's my famous mystery meat," Mac said cheerfully. "Family recipe. Well, military recipe, but who's counting?" The pirate didn't catch the slip, because pirates, as a general rule, weren't hired for their listening skills. Mac loaded up a tray with sandwiches, each one a masterpiece of culinary warfare. He'd even garnished them with little toothpicks, because presentation mattered. The sedative would take about 20 minutes to kick in, which gave him just enough time to assess the situation and start planning his counterattack. "Lunch is served," he announced, carrying the tray back to where the crew was still sprawled on the floor, like they were auditioning for a very depressing play. Vexstar grabbed a sandwich and bit into it, his expression going from suspicious to surprised. "This is actually good." "Don't sound so shocked," Mac said, trying to look hurt. "I take pride in my work." The other pirates dug in, and Mac made a mental note of who ate what. In about 20 minutes, half of Vexstar's crew was going to be taking involuntary naps. The other half would be confused, outnumbered, and dealing with a very angry cook, who'd spent the last 3 years pretending to be harmless. "You know," Mac said conversationally, "I've always wondered what it would be like to meet real pirates. You guys are way more polite than the stories make you out to be." Vexstar laughed, a sound like rocks in a blender. "Don't get too comfortable, cook. Once we're done looting your ship, we're spacing the lot of you." "Ah," Mac nodded, still smiling. "Well, that's unfortunate." What Vexstar didn't know was that Mac had just declared war. And Mac had never lost a war. 23 minutes later, Mac was vindicated in his faith in military-grade food preservatives. 3 pirates had already nodded off at their posts, and 2 more were swaying like they were dancing to music only they could hear. The beauty of a good sedative was that it looked like natural fatigue, especially to criminals who probably didn't get much sleep anyway. "Crix, wake up!" Vexstar snapped at one of the dozing pirates. "This is a robbery, not a sleepover." "Sorry, boss," Crix mumbled, trying to look alert while his eyes kept drifting shut. "Just feeling a bit drowsy." Mac, meanwhile, had volunteered to bring the pirates some coffee, because he was helpful like that. What he didn't mention was that he'd brewed it with water from the ship's emergency supply, which he'd helpfully contaminated with a mild diuretic. Nothing dangerous, mind you, just something to keep the pirates running to the bathroom every 10 minutes. "You're being awfully cooperative for someone who's about to be spaced," observed a pirate with way too many eyes. Her name was apparently Zara, and she was the only one who hadn't eaten a sandwich, which marked her as either very smart or very paranoid. Probably both. "Well," Max said, refilling her coffee cup, "I figure if I'm going to die, might as well go out doing what I love." "Which is?" "Feeding people," Max said with a smile that would have been innocent if you didn't know about his 17 different spatula techniques. The first real accident happened when Mac was cleaning the galley. Pure coincidence, really. He was carrying a pot of boiling oil for the deep fryer when he tripped over absolutely nothing and sent the contents flying. The oil missed him entirely but caught 2 pirates who were standing too close to the galley entrance. "Oops," Max said, watching them dance around cursing in 3 different languages. "Sorry about that. Kitchen accidents happen." Vexta was getting suspicious, which was inconvenient but not unexpected. "You're awfully clumsy for a cook." "You should see me when I'm nervous," Mac replied, already moving toward the service corridor that led to the engine room. "I'll just grab some burn cream from the medical supplies." What Mac actually grabbed was a toolkit and a very detailed knowledge of the ship's environmental systems. See, the thing about cargo ships was that they were basically flying warehouses, which meant they had excellent ventilation systems to prevent toxic buildup. Those same systems could be used to distribute other things throughout the ship. like say a mild hallucinogenic compound that Mac had been saving for special occasions. The compound was actually a food additive designed to enhance flavor perception, but in higher doses it had the delightful side effect of making people see things that weren't there. Nothing too dramatic, just enough to make hardened space pirates question their life choices. Mac introduced the compound to the ventilation system through a service panel that was conveniently located behind the coffee machine. Within minutes, the first effects started showing. "Did that wall just move?" asked a pirate, with tentacles instead of arms. "Wolves don't move, Gleep," another pirate replied, then paused. "Wait, why is my gun talking to me?" Mac continued his rounds, bringing snacks and coffee while mentally cataloging the chaos. The drugged pirates were now completely useless, the caffeinated ones were running to the bathroom in shifts, and the hallucinating ones were having philosophical conversations with their weapons. "Boss," Zara said, pulling Vextar aside. "I think something's wrong with the crew." "What do you mean, wrong?" "Well, Crix is asleep standing up, Gleep thinks his blaster is giving him relationship advice, and Torx has been in the bathroom for 20 minutes. Vextar looked around the ship with growing alarm. Half his crew was incapacitated, and the other half was acting like they'd raided a pharmaceutical warehouse. "It's the cook," he snarled. "Has to be." "The cook?" Zara looked skeptical. "Boss, he's just some guy who makes terrible sandwiches." "Those sandwiches weren't terrible," Vextar said slowly. "They were actually good, and when have you ever heard of a cargo ship cook who could make good food?" It was a fair point. Mac had gotten a little carried away with the seasoning on those sandwiches. Amateur mistake. "Find him," Vextar ordered. "And this time, no more Mr. Nice Pirate." Mac, meanwhile, was 3 decks down in the maintenance tunnels, having what could generously be called the time of his life. He'd forgotten how much he enjoyed a good tactical challenge. The cramped service corridors were perfect for guerrilla warfare, and he knew every inch of them. Plus, he'd just finished rigging the first of several surprises throughout the ship. The beauty of being a cook was that you had access to everything. Cleaning supplies, cooking ingredients, tools, and most importantly, complete freedom to move around the ship without suspicion. Well, without much suspicion. Vextar was definitely catching on. Mac checked his watch. Phase 1 was complete. The pirates were confused, divided, and operating at about 50% effectiveness. Time for Phase 2. He opened his toolkit and smiled. It was time to show these amateurs what a real professional could do with a kitchen knife and a very bad attitude. The first pirate to come looking for Mac was Torx, the one who'd been having bathroom troubles. Poor guy was probably dehydrated and definitely cranky, which made him careless. He came stumbling into the galley just as Mac was innocently preparing what looked like soup, but was actually a very creative mixture of cleaning agents and food coloring. "There you are, cook," Torx snarled, waving his blaster around like it was a magic wand. "Captain wants to see you." "Just let me finish this soup," Mac said, stirring the pot with one hand while palming a meat tenderizer with the other. "It's almost ready." "I said now!" Torx took a step forward, which was exactly what Mac had been hoping for. The beauty of working in a kitchen was that everything was a weapon, if you had the right attitude. Mac spun around with the pot, sending a face full of his soup directly at Torx. The cleaning agent mixture wasn't dangerous, but it was definitely unpleasant, and had the added bonus of temporarily blinding anyone who got a face full of it. "Sorry," Mac said, bringing the meat tenderizer down on Torx's wrist as the pirate clawed at his burning eyes. "Kitchen accident." The blaster clattered to the floor and Torx followed it a moment later, courtesy of a sleeper hold that Mac had learned from a very patient sergeant back in his military days. 1 down, 11 to go. Mac dragged Torx into the walk-in cooler and zip-tied him with some electrical cables. The cooler was soundproof and locked from the outside, which made it the perfect temporary prison. Plus, the cold would keep Torx unconscious for a while longer. "Torx, report," came Vextar's voice over the comm system. Mac picked up Torx's communicator and did his best impression of a pirate with a head cold. "All clear, boss. Cook's making more soup." "Good. Keep an eye on him." Mac grinned and started preparing his next surprise. The ship's artificial gravity system was controlled from the engine room, but there were manual overrides scattered throughout the ship for emergencies. Mac had spent considerable time learning where all those overrides were, because you never knew when you might need to make someone's day a little more difficult. The next pirate to investigate was Gleep, the one with tentacles, who'd been having conversations with his gun. The hallucinogenic compound was still affecting him, which meant he was seeing things that weren't there, and not seeing things that were. Like the tripwire Mac had rigged across the corridor using fishing line from the emergency kit. Sleep hit the wire at ankle height and went down hard, his tentacles flailing as he tried to break his fall. Mac was waiting with a rolling pin, because sometimes the classics were the best choice. "Lights out," Mac said, applying the rolling pin to Gleep's head with just enough force to send him to dreamland. 2 down, 10 to go. The third pirate was Crix, the one who'd been falling asleep at his post. The sedative was still working on him, which made Mac's job considerably easier. Crix was supposed to be guarding the crew, but instead he was slumped in a chair, snoring softly. Mac approached him with a mixing bowl full of what looked like pancake batter, but was actually a fast-setting adhesive compound he'd improvised from flour, water, and industrial glue. He dumped the entire bowl over Crix's head, then stepped back to admire his work. When Crix woke up, he was going to find himself literally stuck to the chair. The adhesive would hold for hours, but wouldn't cause permanent damage, assuming someone eventually cut him free. Mac wasn't feeling particularly generous about that assumption. 3 down, Mac muttered, moving back toward the galley to prepare for the next wave. The beauty of his strategy was that it looked like accidents and bad luck rather than sabotage. Pirates were suspicious by nature, but they were also prone to blaming each other when things went wrong. Mac was counting on that. "Crix, report!" Vextar's voice echoed through the ship. Silence. "Leap, what's your status?" More silence. "Zara, gather the remaining crew. Something's not right." Mac smiled. Vextar was finally catching on, but it was too late. The pirate captain had made the classic mistake of underestimating his opposition, and now Mac had momentum. He heard footsteps approaching the galley and quickly arranged himself at the stove, humming while he prepared what looked like a perfectly innocent omelet. The pan was hot, the oil was sizzling, and Mac was ready. 2 pirates entered the galley, both of them looking nervous. One was Zara, the smart one who hadn't eaten the sandwiches. The other was a new face, probably one of the ship's crew who'd been left to guard the pirate's vessel. "Where's Torx?" Zara demanded, keeping her weapon trained on Mac. "Who's Torx?" Mac asked, flipping the omelet with practiced ease. "You guys all look alike to me." "Don't play dumb, cook. 3 of our crew are missing." "Huh," Mac said, sliding the omelet onto a plate. "Huh, that's weird. You want some breakfast? I make a mean omelet." "We want answers," the other pirate snarled, stepping closer. Mac shrugged and tossed the omelet at the pirate's face. Hot eggs and cheese weren't exactly lethal, but they were definitely distracting. While the pirate was clawing breakfast off his face, Mac grabbed the hot pan and introduced it to the side of his head. 4 down, 8 to go. Zara was smart enough to keep her distance, but not smart enough to back out of the galley. Mac had spent years learning how to fight in confined spaces, and a kitchen was about as confined as it got. "You're not just a cook," Zara said, her weapon steady despite the chaos around her. "Nope," Mac agreed, reaching for a carving knife. "I'm a cook with a very particular set of skills." He threw the knife, not at Zara but at the light fixture above her head. Sparks flew as the blade severed the power coupling, plunging the galley into darkness. In the confusion, Mac rolled behind the prep counter and activated one of his earlier preparations. The emergency lighting kicked in just as the fire suppression system engaged, flooding the galley with foam. Zara was blinded, choking, and completely disoriented. Mac, who'd been expecting it, slipped around behind her and applied a sleeper hold. "Sorry," he said as she went limp. "Nothing personal." 5 down, 7 to go. Mac dragged Zara to the cooler and zip-tied her next to Torx, who was starting to wake up. The pirate took one look at Mac and started cursing in a language that probably didn't exist in polite society. "Language," Mac said, closing the cooler door. "There might be children present." He checked his watch. The whole operation had taken less than an hour, and he was ahead of schedule. Vextar had 7 crew members left, but they were scattered throughout the ship and getting increasingly paranoid. Time for the grand finale. Mac made his way to the ship's main power distribution center, a room that was normally off-limits to everyone except the engineering crew. Fortunately, Mac had spent considerable time learning about the ship's systems, and he knew exactly which switches to flip. The lights went out throughout the ship, replaced by the eerie red glow of emergency lighting. Over the intercom, Mac could hear Vextar cursing and shouting orders to his remaining crew. "Attention, pirates," Mac said, activating the ship's communication system. "This is your cook speaking. I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stellar Gravy today. Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut your stay short due to kitchen difficulties." The response was immediate and profane. Vextar's voice boomed over the comm system, promising Mac a variety of unpleasant deaths. Now, Mac said, making his way toward the bridge. "That's no way to talk to someone who's been feeding you all day. Speaking of which, how are those sandwiches sitting? And the coffee? I hope you're staying hydrated. The cursing got more creative. Mac had saved the best for last. The ship's artificial gravity system had several emergency protocols, including one that could selectively adjust gravity in different sections of the ship. Mac had spent considerable time programming a very special sequence into the system. He activated the program and listened as chaos erupted throughout the ship. The remaining pirates suddenly found themselves dealing with gravity that shifted from normal to 0 to double strength in random intervals. Try aiming a weapon when you're floating 1 second and crushed to the floor the next. Sorry about the turbulence, Mac announced cheerfully. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain calm and try not to shoot anything important. 6 down, 6 to go, and Mac was just getting started. The bridge of the Stellar Gravy looked like a disaster zone when Mac finally arrived. Captain Holloway and the crew were still zip-tied on the floor, looking like they'd been through a blender. The remaining pirates were huddled together, weapons drawn, jumping at every shadow and sound. Captain Vextar stood in the center of it all, his forearms bristling with weapons, his alien features twisted into a mask of rage and confusion. "Show yourself, Cook!" he roared. "Face me like a warrior." "I'm right here," Mac said, stepping onto the bridge with his hands visible and empty. He was still wearing his apron, still covered in flour and grease, still looking like nothing more threatening than a man who'd spent too many years making bad food for ungrateful crews. "You!" Vextar snarled, raising 2 of his weapons. "What did you do to my crew?" "Fed them," Mac said simply. "Gave them coffee, showed them around the ship, basic hospitality really. 5 of my best warriors, taken down by a cook." 6, Mac corrected. "Zora's taking a nap in the cooler, and technically I'm not just a cook." The remaining pirates looked nervous. They'd signed up to rob a cargo ship, not to fight some kind of culinary ninja. One of them, a scaled reptilian with too many teeth, was backing toward the exit. "Don't move, Slex," Vextar snapped. "He's still just one human." "Is he though?" Slex hissed. "Because last I checked, cooks don't usually take down entire boarding parties with kitchen equipment." Mac smiled. "You want to know the funny thing about being underestimated? People never see you coming. They look at the apron, they taste the terrible food, and they assume you're harmless. It's the perfect cover." "Cover for what?" Vextar demanded. "Well," Mac said, casually reaching into his apron pocket, "let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a soldier named Marcus Rodriguez. He was very good at his job, which was finding creative ways to eliminate enemy combatants in hostile environments. He specialized in what the military calls asymmetric warfare, and what everyone else calls fighting dirty. The pirates were listening now, their weapons still trained on Mac, but their attention focused on his words. "This soldier had a very successful career," Mac continued. "He served in the Proxima Conflict, the Titan Rebellion, and the Outer Rim Pacification. He earned more medals than he could wear and developed a reputation for being able to turn any environment into a weapon." "So what happened to this soldier?" Vextar asked, though Mac could see the pirate captain was already figuring it out. "He got tired," Mac said. "Tired of the killing, tired of the politics, tired of watching good people die for stupid reasons. So he retired, changed his name, and became a cook on a cargo ship. He figured the worst thing that could happen was food poisoning." Mac pulled his hand out of his apron pocket, revealing what looked like a simple soup ladle. "But then some pirates decided to threaten his crew, and Marcus Rodriguez, despite his best efforts to stay retired, discovered that old habits die hard." "You're bluffing," Vextar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Mac asked. "Let's see. I've taken down 6 of your crew, using nothing but kitchen supplies and basic chemistry. I've turned your own ship's systems against you. I've been 3 steps ahead of you since the moment you boarded. Does that sound like a cook to you?" The truth was starting to sink in. The pirates were looking at each other, at their captain, at Mac, and realizing that they'd made a very serious mistake. "You want to know how I knew you were coming?" Mac asked. "Because I've been watching the shipping lanes for weeks. I saw your ship's heat signature, tracked your approach vector, and calculated your optimal boarding time. You're not the first pirates to try this route, and you won't be the last." "Impossible," Vextar breathed. "You're just a cook." "I'm a cook who spent 15 years in military intelligence," Mac said. "I'm a cook who can field strip a plasma rifle blindfolded. I'm a cook who speaks 17 languages and knows 43 ways to kill someone with common household items." He hefted the soup ladle, and somehow it looked more dangerous than any weapon the pirates were carrying. "But most importantly," Mac continued, I'm a cook who really, really hates it when people threaten his crew. That's when Vexstar made his move. 4 arms meant he could fire multiple weapons simultaneously, filling the bridge with energy blasts. It was a devastating attack that would have killed anyone standing where Mac had been. The problem was, Mac wasn't standing there anymore. The years of retirement hadn't dulled his reflexes or his tactical awareness. He'd been waiting for Vexstar to make his play, and when the pirate captain committed to the attack, Mac was already moving. He rolled left, came up behind the navigation console, and hurled the soup ladle with the kind of precision that only came from years of practice. The ladle caught Vexstar in the wrist, disrupting his aim and sending energy blasts wild across the bridge. Rule number 1, Mac said, vaulting over the console. Never underestimate your opponent. Vexstar swung 2 of his remaining weapons toward Mac, but the cook was already inside his reach. Mac grabbed the pirate's lower left arm and used it as leverage to spin around behind him. Rule number 2, Mac continued, applying a joint lock that would have made his old drill instructor proud. Always know your environment. He guided Vexstar's own weapon toward the ship's gravity controls and squeezed the trigger. The gravitational field fluctuated wildly, sending the remaining pirates floating toward the ceiling. Rule number 3, Mac said as Vexstar struggled against the hold. Never start a fight you can't finish. The finishing move was almost anticlimactic. Mac applied pressure to specific nerve clusters on Vexstar's neck, a technique he'd learned from a Centauri martial arts master during the Outer Rim campaign. The pirate captain's struggles grew weaker, then stopped entirely as he lost consciousness. And rule number 4, Mac said, lowering the unconscious pirate to the floor. Always season your food properly. He pulled a small container from his apron and sprinkled something over Vexstar's prone form. It looked like seasoning, but it was actually a fast-acting neural suppressant that would keep the pirate captain unconscious for hours. The remaining pirates, still floating near the ceiling thanks to the gravity disruption, were staring at Mac with a mixture of terror and awe. Now then, Mac said, straightening his apron and looking up at them. Who wants to discuss surrender terms? The response was immediate and unanimous. Weapons clattered to the floor as the pirates raised their hands in defeat. Excellent, Mac said, restoring normal gravity and watching the pirates drop ungracefully to the deck. Captain Holloway, if you could call the authorities, I'll start preparing lunch. All this excitement has made me hungry. As he walked off the bridge, Mac could hear Pip's voice, high and squeaky with amazement. He's really just the cook? No, Captain Holloway said, his voice filled with newfound respect. He's never been just the cook. Mac smiled. It felt good to be appreciated, even if it meant his cover was blown. Maybe it was time to update his resume. Ship's cook and security consultant had a nice ring to it. 3 hours later, the Stellar Gravy was back on course, the pirates were in custody, and Mac was doing what he did best, standing in his galley, making lunch. The only difference was that now he had an audience. So you really can cook, Pitt said, watching Mac prepare what looked like an actual meal instead of his usual crimes against cuisine. All this time, you were just pretending to be terrible at it? Not pretending, Mac said, expertly filleting a piece of synthetic fish. I was genuinely making terrible food. There's a difference. But why? Thornberry asked. The security chief was still nursing his wounded pride, having slept through the entire pirate attack. Why would someone with your skills waste time making bad sandwiches? Mac paused in his food preparation, considering the question. Because I was tired of being Marcus Rodriguez, legendary military operative. I wanted to be Mac, the harmless cook who nobody paid attention to. I wanted to be invisible. Well, you're definitely not invisible anymore, Captain Holloway said, entering the galley with a spring in his step. The captain had spent the last hour talking to various authorities, and apparently having a former military hero on his crew was doing wonders for his reputation. The Sector Defense Force wants to give you a commendation, Holloway continued. The Merchant Marine Guild is talking about a reward, and the insurance company is so impressed they're offering us a discount on our premiums. Wonderful, Mac said dryly. Fame is exactly what I was trying to avoid. You can't avoid it forever, Zara said from the doorway. The pirate had been released from the cooler an hour ago, after agreeing to testify against her former captain in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was rubbing her wrists where the zip ties had been, but she didn't look particularly upset about her situation. I have to admit, she continued, I'm impressed. I've never seen anyone take down a boarding party with kitchen equipment before. It's all about improvisation, Mac said, seasoning what looked like an actual edible meal. Military training teaches you to use whatever's available. In a kitchen, everything's available. The soup ladle throw was particularly elegant, Zara added. Where did you learn to do that? Titan, Max said simply. There was a situation involving rebel fighters and a mess hall. I had to get creative. The crew exchanged glances. They were starting to realize that their quiet cook had stories that would make their hair curl. So what now? Pip asked. Are you going to leave? Go back to the military? Mac looked around the galley, at the crew that had become his family over the past 3 years. They were looking at him differently now, with respect instead of tolerant amusement. But they were still his crew. I like it here, he said finally. Good benefits, flexible hours, and the commute is unbeatable. Plus, someone has to keep you people fed. But your food is actually good now, Thornbury protested. I had some of that fish you made for the authorities, and it was amazing. Yeah, well, Max said, ladling what looked like actual soup into bowls. I figured since my cover was blown, I might as well start cooking properly. Consider it a bonus. He handed out the bowls, and the crew took their first tentative sips. The looks of surprise and delight on their faces were almost worth the trouble of the pirate attack. This is incredible, Pip breathed. You've been holding out on us for 3 years? I've been protecting you, Mac corrected. Bad food was part of my cover. If I'd been making meals like this from the beginning, people would have asked questions. What kind of questions? Holloway asked. The kind that lead to people figuring out that their ship's cook used to run black ops missions for military intelligence, Max said. The kind that attract attention from people who might want to settle old scores. Is that going to be a problem now? Thornbury asked, suddenly looking nervous. Mac considered the question while he cleaned his prep station. Maybe. Probably. But we'll deal with it when it happens. That's what contingency planning is for. Contingency planning? Pip squeaked. Rule number 5, Max said with a grin. Always have a backup plan. And a backup for the backup, and preferably a backup for that one too. Zara laughed. You know, if you ever get tired of the cook thing, you'd make a hell of a pirate. Thanks, but I've seen how that turns out, Max said, gesturing toward the detention cells where the other pirates were being held. Besides, I like honest work. It's relaxing. Relaxing? Holloway sputtered. You single-handedly defeated an entire boarding party. With kitchen equipment, Mac added. Don't forget that part, it's important for the legend. There's going to be a legend? Pip asked, eyes wide. Oh, definitely, Zara said. The story of the cook who took down the Crimson Claw pirates with a soup ladle and some expired sandwiches, that's going to be told in bars across the galaxy. Max sighed. Great, there goes my peaceful retirement. Look on the bright side, Thornbury said, finishing his soup. At least now we know why you always seemed so calm during emergency drills. And why you knew so much about the ship's systems, Pip added. And why you never seemed surprised when the proximity alarms went off, Holloway finished. Mac nodded. Fair points. Although to be honest, I was hoping we'd never have to deal with actual pirates. I was looking forward to a nice, boring career of making mediocre food and staying under the radar. But this was more fun, right? Zara asked. Mac thought about it for a moment. The tactical challenge, the satisfaction of outwitting the enemy, the rush of combat, the feeling of protecting his crew. Yeah, he admitted. It was kind of fun. So what's for dinner? Thornbury asked hopefully. Something good, Mac promised. I figure after 3 years of punishment, you've all earned a decent meal. As the crew dispersed, chattering excitedly about their adventure and their cook's hidden talents, Mac went back to his prep work. The familiar rhythm of chopping, seasoning, and cooking was soothing after the chaos of the morning. He was Marcus Rodriguez, veteran of 3 wars and decorated hero of the Outer Rim campaign. He was also Mac, the ship's cook, who made the best synthetic fish this side of the galaxy. And for the first time in 3 years, he was okay with being both. The stellar gravy sailed on through the stars, carrying its cargo, its crew, and its secrets. And in the galley, a man who had once been the most dangerous soldier in the galaxy stood over a stove, humming tunelessly while he prepared dinner for his family. Some retirements, Mac reflected, were more interesting than others. Hey Mac, Pip called from the corridor. The news services are asking for interviews. They want to know about the cook who defeated the Crimson Claw pirates. Mac smiled and kept cooking. Tell them I'm busy. I've got a reputation to maintain. Which reputation? Pip asked. Both of them, Mac said. I'm a man of many talents. And in the deep black of space, the stellar gravy continued its journey, crewed by the usual collection of misfits and dreamers, plus one cook who happened to be the most dangerous man in the galaxy. It was, Mac decided, exactly where he belonged.